morning, everyone. Welcome to the Future Contingent Workforce. I'm Ashish Kaushal, the CEO of Hire Talent and one of the co-founders of Consciously Unbiased. We're really excited. Today, we have some of the best leaders in contingent labor who are going to revisit some of the insights they talked about in January for 2024, and of course, make some further predictions for the rest of the year. This year has been a roller coaster on so many levels, and the world sentiment is all over the place. The recent elections in India skewed left, opting for a more balanced government, while France's elections skewed the opposite towards the far right. And then the US and other countries still have many different directions to go in, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Let's talk about regulations, which have become increasingly confusing for gig workers. We need to do a better job to help shape politicians' views on our industry because we clearly haven't done a great job, and it's directly impacting us all. The MSPs did a great job of mobilizing the community to stop some of the laws that were on the table in California, but more needs to be done. Employers learned lessons from the pandemic on blanket hiring and are focused on hiring quality versus quantity because quantity had some negative impacts on productivity. Efficiency and productivity is front and center. As Bruce Morton mentioned several times, and in fact authored a book on this, we are in a skill-based hiring mode. Employers seem to be trending towards SOW versus contingent labor, partially because of the regulatory environment. As Teresa Carroll says, we go through cycles where we have to squeeze the balloon from one end to the other and back, and it seems like we're in that cycle right now. In record time, we went from the great resignation to, as Brian Sarkowski mentioned, people won't leave their jobs now. And that's great for business and the available workforce. DEI also has had its challenges this year. I've heard people say that woke went too far. My take is we focus so much on the semantics that we lost sight of the goal of giving qualified people opportunities no matter what their background is. The idea around DEI should be to create moments where companies consciously nurture creative collisions of ideas. That's where innovation meets diversity to generate ROI and inclusion. Finally, both parties are talking about keeping qualified talent in the US and opening gates for qualified workers to enter the country, from issuing green cards for people who come to the US for college to increase the H-1B cap. That can help reduce inflation and make us more competitive. I'm excited about today's discussion and our amazing guest panelists. We have Bruce Morton, who's a global head of strategy from Allegis Global Solutions, Brian Salkowski, CEO of Impalum Group, Jennifer Torney, Global VP Client Experiences and Partnerships, Tapfin Talent Solutions, Jason Israti, CEO of Brightfield, Doug Leby, CEO of Beeline, Karen Selfers, Global Head of Consumer Products and Life Sciences and Industrials at Pontoon Solutions, and Teresa Carroll, CEO of Magnet, who'll be joining us shortly. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, Ashish.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Hello. Good morning, Teresa. So let's start off with the labor market. Is it good, or are things converging from employment, what the employment report says versus what you guys are seeing on the ground?
Yeah,
Brian, you want to start?
I'll jump in and
Sure.
just say, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jen.
Again, we do this every time. Go ahead, Brian.
I was waiting for someone, but then Ashish prompted me. I think it's a little bit mixed. So it's not a bad job market right now. We all see the headlines that come out from Bureau of Labor Statistics that unemployment is relatively low. We're off of our peak in terms of labor participation, but it is starting to creep back up. Wage inflation it's settled a bit, but I always think of it, and so there's the broader market, and then we think about it in terms of our industry, and the recruitment industry has been a laggard. So when we dissect the jobs reports where there's been gains, there's actually been net losses for the temporary employment sector. And that's being felt in the industry and amongst the many suppliers that are engaged there. So it's not a singular answer. There are certainly bright spots, certain skills-based areas that are in high demand. In general, it's level. Our industry is hurting a little bit relative to others.
And Jen, you were going to say?
That was just really well put. I apologize, Brian, that I trip over you sometimes. I feel like that's
It's our thing, Jen.
but nonetheless, it's planned. No, I couldn't have said that better. That was really eloquently stated. And I love that you look at the economy plus our business, because depending on what part of our world that we live in, it might indicate and bode well. And we have parts of our organization that are booming right now. Our outplacement group is going crazy, and RPO is hurting, but contingent labor is steady-ish. SOW is quite a bit up, right? So we kind of expect that when we put the clamps down, like you talked about squeezing the balloon. But we've seen consistent headcount growth for, gosh, I think it's been about 8 or 9 weeks now. It's very small growth, but it's growth nonetheless. And that's a trend. That's a good trend. Obviously, we just saw the, consumer confidence is down, right? We saw that headline this week, which is kind of, it's a disappointment. But, I think that we've still got a long road to go. I'm encouraged by my segment of the business that I support, right, by the non-full-time. But I'm still a little concerned, obviously. Like when you see consumer confidence is down and that people are very worried, we're still seeing very significant layoffs with some of our larger clients, which we know will eventually the non-employee workforce at some point. So just I'm cautiously optimistic. I'd probably say I'm a little bit more middle of the road, excited about some of the business that we're seeing. But still kind of watching to see what happens with the rest of the year.
Yeah. Jen, it's always good to listen to our competitors and compare notes of what we're seeing and very, whatever you say about the different segments, I totally concur. So very much see the same thing. And I agree. I think, whilst we want to be cautiously optimistic because we definitely are seeing some very recent pickups in volumes on the contingent labor side, it remains to be seen how the rest of 24 plays out. We have yet to see the interest rates be cut. The consumers are hurting with all the price increases we have seen, undoubtedly. And so, there's really no reason to be just brightly optimistic at this point. There is a lot of unknowns. And so, that's probably what we're all seeing. But it is encouraging that we are seeing a slight pickup in contingent labor volumes in recent weeks. And I would also throw in there, we've seen RFP activity pick up over the last couple of months, which was not the case at the beginning of the year. It was a really slow start. And so progressively, the pipeline of deals coming in or RFPs has actually increased. That's encouraging.
But do you guys feel like the labor rates might be overinflated or double counted, and there might be more people laid off than we think there are currently? Because it just seems weird that contingent's down, people are laying off thousands of people and giving early retirement packages, yet the number is not moving.
I just think structurally that math isn't math. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just, when you say
I was just going to say, I think we've got a different way of hiring, different types of categories of hiring than we ever did when all of those statistics were created, right? And so they're measuring traditional employment, but we know that there's a lot of underemployment. There are people that are gig working just to be able to keep the lights on and pay the bills, and which contributes in a number of ways to not just the unemployment rate, because they're technically employed, but also the economy. If you're not making what you used to make, you're not spending into the economy the way you used to be able to spend. So, and that ultimately has a negative impact.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It doesn't represent underemployment. And there's also a significant amount, as you mentioned, gig workers, part-time, et cetera, that shows up as employment. But it doesn't mean from a sentiment perspective that there's wide excitement about the job market right now.
Yeah.
I think, Brian, when you look at the U6 and the underemployment, it rates closer to 7 or 8%. So for me, the unemployment rate is fallacious, misleading, and not very helpful. And I talked to my daughter, who's a recent grad. She's like, we're all having trouble finding jobs. Everybody's asking, do you have experience? So, and even when you look at the jobs reports that come out, if you look back the last year, like 55% of them are in government, hospitality, or healthcare.
That's right.
That leaves a wide swath for all the other jobs. So it's very misleading. And I mean, I agree with what you guys are saying. We're seeing very, very modest growth. I mean, we had best week we've had in a year and a half. So that's good. But again, it's nothing to write home about. Assignments are down 5%, which feels pretty good versus where they've been, but it's still down, right? So the modest growth we're seeing is like up 50 basis points week over week in terms of starts. And then when I zoom out and look at our clients, a third of them are up and a third of them are down. And it wasn't a third up previously. So there's maybe some harbingers that are going to bring some good news, but kind of back when we were talking about the recession, like it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't really see the data that says anything's happening in 2024. I do think we got to get interest rates a little bit better. I think we got to get past an election. I think new budgets coming out next year will be an impetus, but I think it's going to be the same old thing with just very modest growth through the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have an idea. What if we took Teresa's data and your data and created a temporary jobs report? That'd be more accurate than I think what we have today.
Well, I have to tell you, Doug thinks that he's either Prince or Adele because he only needs a first name. And I love the fact that Jen used my balloon animal analogy. So thank you, Jen, for doing that. But anytime I could work with Doug on putting together an industry index, I would jump right in. How's that?
That sounds good to me.
Good job on the forced marriage there. Well done.
Actually, the right Doug and Jason and I, we could provide an index.
I just feel like it's more accurate than, because right now they're doing polls by taking segments of data and saying this is what's happening, right? And if you guys actually have all the orders and between the two of you and probably Fieldglass that you can.
Yeah, but Brian had a good point. There's a whole part of the labor market our industry doesn't serve.
True.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, imagine you get laid off from your corporate job and you make six figures and you've got a family to provide for. You get laid off, you run out of your savings, you still can't find something else, and you decide to drive Uber. Drive Uber just to be able to at least pay your mortgage. Ask that person if they're employed. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that those stats that we have today would say that they are, but I guarantee that they would say, no, this is not really what I had in mind.
Yeah.
I think that's the piece.
So the other thing I'll add to that is, I mean, I've been in the industry a long time. We've always said under 5% in the U.S. unemployment is full employment, because you will never have a perfect skills match or a perfect geography match. So even the underemployed maybe could be employed, but they're in the wrong geography and the wrong skills.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, you're on mute.
I know you're trying to get in.
As he's swearing to
I
himself.
was being compliant. Sorry. I think we're past the point of being able to rely on big, broad, macro government statistics to help us guide our businesses. It's good for maybe looking at the sky kind of thing. But if you're actually trying to drive your business, most of the things we've been talking about are actually lagging indicators. So if we're trying to figure out what's moving forward based on those lagging indicators, based on the volatility industry to industry, that by necessity will throw us off. But the RFPs, the fact that Doug is seeing, a third of them starting to come up, we're seeing the same. Ash, I'd be happy to introduce you to our business model. We aggregate transactional data and report back on these statistics.
You need to be part of that mix.
More on that later, hopefully.
I brought you in, Jason.
Fine. It's
I
fine.
brought you in.
I would have. Grace, you're my saving grace. I appreciate that. But the leading indicators that I'm most excited about are the companies. I think what's behind these RFPs are companies are ready now for the big strategic change. Because core to those RFPs are SOW management, the full complement of the non-employee workforce. It's not just about how do you save 5 to 10% on staff off anymore.
And so you would basically take the data from the two sources and build a report for us that we want.
Like an Excel pivot table kind of thing. Yeah, that's yeah.
And independently verified by you, which is great.
And Bruce isn't going to contribute because he's keeping his data to himself.
So bringing that, Bruce, I'd love to get your thoughts.
We had a talent data exchange. Might want to call it TDX or something. I don't know.
We actually already put out a press release about that data.
I love it.
Ash, we'll give you a separate session.
It sounds good. Bruce, so we went back, if we go back to January and some of the predictions, and I think this will, I'd love to get your thoughts on what we just talked about, but then also you had said that the US would be flat at best. Offshore 2.0 BOT would be the trend for 2024 and moving forward. Jobs to India, nearshoring. And you also mentioned that it would be like a 30% year-over-year growth. Are those trends continuing the way you thought they would play out?
Wow, I got those right. Thank you for bringing those up. Don't read the other list. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely seeing that. I'm sure we're all tracking the GCC market every day now. Seems there's a new GCC opening. So it's definitely the way a lot of organizations in North America are starting to get their high-end IT work done. They're sending the work where the people are. I think it's moved beyond labor arbitrage now. It's about available talent. So I think that's a continuing trend. And I think some of that, if we could really dig into the data, would start answering some of these reasons why North America's flat. And I think that, we're all so used to being controlled and managed by growth. That's all of our jobs, right? We all get paid on growth. And we're entering a world where, we can only say post-COVID for so long. I guess next year we can say post-election. Give us another but, it's perhaps this is the new norm, whatever that level is, whatever that number of contractors out right now. Where are those additional people going to come from? Doug was saying, I think that there is a mismatch in skills. We've got the one problem with, and I have 6 kids that are all that sort of around that age, and they're coming out of university and trying to find work. And then you've got the problem with the blue collar, retail, and hospitality industry where everybody's too well educated and won't take those jobs. Yeah. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch there. But to answer your question, I think that we're definitely seeing that move for organizations that are taking very, very seriously how they're going to get work done in the future. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of those, that means now. They're not waiting. So I think, something for everybody to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
But it does, I think the net result of that, it makes North America far more competitive. And you've got staffing companies, the only way they're going to grow is to take business off their competitors. Mm-hmm. There's no tide rising right now, at least for the short term. So get those BD skills sharpened would be the phrase.
Hey, Bruce. What you're saying resonates. I talked to one of my top 5 clients about offshore, and I was asking him, when do you think this tide that you referred to will rise? And so he shared with me the data, which comports with what you're saying, and that is they've moved a lot to India. So when we look at our KPIs and metrics, actually they look very positive for the last month. The one that was out of whack was cancellations, which really makes sense to me. So we dug deep, and a majority were from this organization who's gone to India. Basically said, like, we can't get the talent. It's a strategic direction to go there and try to get just people at a lower cost, but we can't even fill them. And so they're coming in from all different channels, and then they're canceling the requisitions, which that's a dynamic I hadn't really seen before. So I totally agree with you that there's a move over there. And I also agree, unfortunately, that I think this might be the new norm, right? We've all been somewhat constrained. So we figured out how to do a bit more or less and prioritize. And then there's the great promise of AI, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and generative AI and those things that I think people are looking at a little bit more seriously than we have in the past, without necessarily saying, gosh, I can't wait to turn around and hire another 10% of my workforce. I don't think a lot of people really want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Have you guys heard of Devin, the AI engineer, the superhuman software developer?
Devin?
No.
So there's this new AI engineer that's coming out. It's called Devin, and it's basically supposed to replace software engineers. The problem right now is it's more expensive than actually hiring an engineer, but that could actually that price will go down over time, right? But that eventually could reverse the offshoring to bring it back onshore if you have these AI engineers doing software development for you. Mm-hmm. It's just something to look at. I think it's in the future, but I do agree. It's not going to be for the next 3-4 years until they get that right. Jen, you were cautiously optimistic about 24. Are you still feeling that for the second half?
Not as much. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic for our business. I feel like we're in better shape going into the last half of the year than we were last year. Mm-hmm. But I think somebody that I work with says, you got to sell yourself out of a crisis. And that's what we are doing. And so that's working well for us. But again, we're going after what we can. It makes me nervous when I hear about some of our clients laying off in the 5 figures at a clip, especially mid-year. because even though that's FTE and impacting that, we know at some point, you know, like I said, the impact will happen for our segments of the business as well. So I would say less optimistic and more, I would say flat is how I feel. Like, I just want to be able to get through this year and feel like we accomplished most of what we wanted to get done. I don't think I have aspirations. Then we're gonna blow it out of the water in the last half.
So flat, still the new growth.
Yeah.
Karen, you said you were looking for a decent 24, but you were cautious. You said that we had a buffer in 23 because all the hiring in 21 and 22. But you did feel like we were burning through the buffer. So is the shift between quality of hire versus speed to hire still the focus? And are you seeing a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I definitely, you know, the theme of the first half was we saw a lot less attrition, and I'm speaking mostly of the RPO side, the permanent hiring. We saw a lot less attrition at our clients, and so that obviously impacted us. We just didn't have to feel, you know, the churn of talent as much as we did after the pandemic, and that really hurt us. Now, mind you, we sometimes we have to take a step back. I mean, we have to realize that the pandemic and the following years were record years, record after record. And so while we all feel like, oh my God, it was like a tough first half, if I go back and look at the trends, it was still the second best year in history. So like, you know, our ambitions, you know, rose during that time. But to answer your question, absolutely. I see companies making big efforts on trying to retain their talent internally. That's also true, like reduced churn on the contingent labor side as well. And that has impacted us. It's absolutely quality before speed now to reduce the costs. So here's the other side I briefly want to touch on. I mean, all our clients are in the same boat. We all are. We all need to be cost conscious. And so that also is a fact for talent acquisition and hiring.
Yeah. But then if you're cost conscious, how do you grow your way out of this?
That's so true. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we all have to try and find business, and how do we do that? Where? What pockets, right? And we all compete for probably the same big pie.
No, definitely. Jason, you saw uncertainty and increase in trends on the bottom line, cost savings, and a trend towards lower demand of contingent labor. You mentioned that CHRO is back in the mix. Has that continued? And is AI helping what you called good hygiene in the quality of hire less?
Yeah, that's right. We spent a little time on hygiene last time. Smelling great, just for those wondering at home.
That's subjective.
The CHRO has become relevant, you know, from a strategic perspective because it's a workforce question. But I think the C-level executive that's really at the table is the CFO. And the chief procurement officer that the CFO is bringing into the table to say we can execute on the strategic initiatives, not just go find savings, as well as the CIO, where a lot of that feels very greenfield because there's been years of excessive spending just to try to grab at talent. So we're seeing that as a very exciting period. This has been a continued period of growth for us because that hygiene is what's on the menu. And so people are investing in AI and making changes to their programs, even where we're hearing about budgets being cut. The efforts coming into making what is non-employment of the acquisition of the future is happening now. It's been an exciting time.
Yeah. Do you feel like we would, if we just were more even keel on our cutting and hiring, that we'd save more money over time? Because I feel like we cut deeply and then they're like, oh shoot, then we need to hire, and we overpay for hiring because there's not enough people because we all move in the same direction at the same time.
I think when I think about this client by client, not as an aggregate macro trend, the pieces where the efficiencies are showing up are at the transactional level. So it's not trying to game at the macro. It's, look, we were missing the skill level resolution. Look, we were completely misclassified between an SOW and staff aug. Look, we were only hiring the most expensive people in the most expensive locations instead of these others. You know, there are double-digit percentage efficiencies that you can bring to spend just by tackling those items. Those are things we've been talking about for over 10 years. And a lot of the underlying bones as to why we've been talking about them still exist. So COVID, you know, all these other things, you know, throw bolides to make it more variable. But those are the things that still exist and still have plenty of room to be worth investing in.
Definitely. Teresa, we missed you in January, so you didn't give us predictions. Therefore, I'd love to get your thoughts on the second half of 2024, and you could probably be the most right of all of us at this point.
That's true. Just like a forecast, 3 + 9 is usually pretty off versus 6 + 6 is 9 + 3. So the one I was on was before the new year started. And if I recall, we were all probably hopeful versus optimistic that we would turn the year and things would get a little better. And it actually got worse, as we all know. So I would agree with everybody and what they're saying. We've hit a plateau. We're seeing a plateau. I describe it as a roller coaster. I say it's much more fun to ride a roller coaster up in business versus down. I'm not seeing the up part of the roller coaster, but I'm definitely seeing that part where you're kind of hovering and you're really excited to go up to come down. Well, we're really excited to go up and the whole industry is. So again, another analogy, Jen, a roller coaster, and we talk about it in our town halls. I'm definitely seeing, a good probably 4, maybe 5 months worth of that plateau. And I always also say 3 data points make a trend. So I have 3 + 2 now. So there we go. I'm optimistic. We've hit a plateau. I don't have any insight whatsoever how high that roller coaster is going to go when it starts going. I'm sure somebody else has that.
It is trending up. And Brian, you'd said you thought we'd see a bounce back in the second half of the year because capital projects can be delayed for only so long. Are you still feeling that way? Because I've heard some companies.
Yeah, I hope you're recording this because I have to admit on camera I was wrong. No, unfortunately, that pent-up demand is getting pushed back further. So the general trend is, as others have stated it, we're in a period of uncertainty, and that uncertainty is breeding inaction.
And are you still seeing people not leaving?
Yeah, it's and this isn't just within our organization. It's certainly true at Impellum and Guiding Global, but if I look across our customer base, attrition rates are at historic lows. So there's that dual dynamic, and you touched it at the beginning. Not only are there less opportunities, but there's less people looking for those opportunities. So it's an interesting dynamic, and it's a world away from where we were just 2 years ago.
True. I wonder if salaries are going down as a result too, because there was an inflation on salaries, at least within our industry.
Well, I'll tell you in healthcare, just to give you the healthcare perspective, we did go into the year assuming that wages would drop drastically coming into this year. They haven't dropped as low as we thought. So wages are holding steadier than we thought in healthcare.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Doug, you had
it was going to be they're moderating. So we saw some large gains over the past couple years. This year, it's still in the plus territory, but it's the percentage has slowed dramatically.
Yeah, and versus pre-COVID, they're higher in healthcare than they were pre-COVID. So we didn't know how far they would drop back to a pre-COVID level, and we're happy that they haven't dropped as far as we thought it would.
Yeah, that's awesome. Doug, you'd missed the last one as well, but you had great representation in Brian. Brian mentioned the balance between cost and quality of hires.
Is that oxymoronic, or are you just goading me here?
I'm not goading you.
All right, keep going. Okay.
Brian mentioned the balance between cost and quality of hires and the trend to capture all the different ways we use labor in the VMS. Is that being adopted at a large scale? And how do you feel about the second half of 2024 and 2025? I know you guys have been really pushing the total talent piece and trying to get data to be shared.
I love this industry. Nothing gets adopted at large scale. Okay. So look, Bruce was writing about the unified workforce a long time ago. And I will say that we are seeing an increase in demand. We partner a lot with Jason. So it is converging with those that are still, I would say, relatively early adopters. Every time I get on stage, my bane, my soapbox is we have got to get everything in one place. And there's different solutions and ways to do that. And for some reason, it's still anathema. So I see positive trends in that direction, and I see more growth, which is fantastic, but I never see anything happen at a large scale, as I said. I'm not really going to comment on 2024 because I think it's big. I think it's done. We're all going to just ride this thing out and be hopeful that, as I mentioned earlier, some of the clients I talked to are going to start to release capital in next year. And I think that'll happen. But I think I'm going to key up on what you said, Bruce. I think this might be closer to the new normal. and Karen, what you said as well, like there was a huge surge after COVID, and we all probably participated in it, right? Things were good. We had people, we were less mindful than we would be. Then all of a sudden we find ourselves with interest rates, which are cramping our style a bit. Yeah. And we've got to be more circumspect. And a lot of us went through risks, and especially being in the human capital world, we hate that. And so I think there's a degree of a hangover from that, or a gun shy that says, man, I don't want to do that again. So I'm going to be really circumspect in how we hire. And so I think we'll see growth in 2025, but I absolutely don't see it getting to the historical levels post the pandemic. I think people are going to be far more moderate in their hiring decisions. And again, trying to focus more on efficiencies. I think, some of these projects that have been holding us back because they're bigger projects, those are working their way through the system. So I agree with my colleagues that from a new logos and implementation and business perspective, H2 looks great. But from spend, et cetera, and I'm not that optimistic that that's going to increase materially.
Maybe this is finally the reason that we have to push harder for percent of spend to come out of this system. We're doing important things for the most important companies in the world. There's no reason for that to have to be as volatile as what's happening around those spend levels.
Agreed.
Yeah, my understanding, Jason, from your business, this must be a banner year for you guys.
It is, and correct, because we're not ebbing and flowing with that spend. For us, people are investing in a fixed piece of infrastructure, not only to find savings now, but for ongoing cost controls. So for us, it's been an appropriate wake-up call. Never waste a crisis.
Definitely. So speaking of that, are you seeing SOW getting captured by clients through MSP programs more so than in the past? Is that the trend that's happening today?
Very much so, and I think it's at the heart of some of these RFPs that we're talking about. And I think that the players on this call can win through innovation. That's the answer to that question. How to grow without additional investment is through innovation, and I think that's cheaper than ever, actually.
Yeah, and buyers should be looking at that because there's more cost savings in SOW versus contingent at this point. Right?
I mean, we haven't touched on the AI thread yet, but in my world, that has cut my expenses. My roadmap has gotten significantly less expensive with the level of AI that's available now as utilities.
So, Jason, we will be renegotiating our contract after this call.
That's a good point, Doug. That's a really good point. I've started seeing buyers put that as a criteria in their selection. What are you doing with AI and automation? Can I get a piece? That scares me, but
that's scary as well for multiple reasons, not just the cost pressure. And I know we'll get into this, so I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. So I'll defer to you, Ashish, but I think that's an important topic later on the call.
Yeah.
Let's go with it.
They're requiring it as a criteria of what are you doing is probably going to grow, but then wanting a piece of it is what scares me.
Well, here's what scares me.
I've seen it both ways, Teresa. I've seen it where there's obviously there's interest in innovation, extra value that it can bring. So it's sitting there in RFPs, even if it's not in a formal RFP, it's part of a discussion. But the flip side of that, I've seen very recently scenarios where the inquiry is there and it is a risk mitigation play. They are concerned about AI doing too much. Might that build bias into their selection process? So it's not a singular answer. I see a bunch of heads nodding. So there's keen interest in it. On one hand, how can you use this to everyone's advantage, create new value through innovation? On the other hand, how can we be ensured that there are controls in place such that we're not opening up ourselves to new and unquantified risks?
Yeah.
Well, I might even just suggest too that when people ask that question, they don't always know what they're asking. It's sort of this nebulous ask. And Jason said it best on one of our most recent calls. He kind of just said, listen, AI is just automation. There's a host of different, it's infinite what you can do with AI, chatbots, automating things, creating innovation, but how are you rolling that into your business? Is it going to be effective for you and what we are going to be delivering for you? Is there going to be a cost to it? Is it going to be free? Is it going to be embedded? Will you not ever see it? And all it does is speed up your processes. And I think most of us would agree we've all got some semblance of a roadmap around AI. Some things we've been delivering with AI, whether it's market intelligence or, like I said, chatbots, and then some of us are further along. But I think it's one of those things where, what are you doing with AI? It's like, well, there's things that we've been doing all along. And then there's this stuff that we're planning to be doing, and it's like, you know, a 45-page slide deck, you know, of all of the different things. So
I was going to say, I'm smiling because I think your first statement was so spot on. A lot of times it's being asked because they think they're supposed to ask it, not because there's any specific business objective underneath. It's just, it's hot, it's a buzzword, and I think I'm supposed to be asking about this. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I'm not going to look
and
at it.
I don't want a provider that doesn't have the thing that people think is cool.
I checked that.
You know why they're asking? It's also
Sorry, Ash.
right? So this is my great lamentation, and it's a marketing ploy for so many organizations right now. Shiny object. If I hear AI led one more time, I'm going to vomit. And I went out to Napa area, I don't know, half a year ago, and I counted the billboard signs from the airport to downtown San Francisco. 7 out of the 10 were tech oriented, and to the other 3 were not. 10 out of 10 had AI in it, right? That's typically where things flow from. And so, you know, we've been very circumspect with our message around AI, and I really want to get into what you're talking about, Brian, because you don't hear a lot of people talking about HireVue's lawsuit, or frankly, what's happened to Microsoft or Amazon. I mean, there are lawsuits out there, and there's going to be a lot more, in my opinion. And so I get very frustrated when I hear people just wantonly throw around AI as a shiny object. And you're right, our buyers don't know what they don't know. And you know, 90% of us in this industry don't either, unless you're Jason Israeli, you know, someone who makes a life of this. So that's why I was saying earlier, Teresa, what I'm most afraid of is less around the question and more around taking people down a bunny hole with a shiny object, and then the lawsuits will arise. And frankly, we probably need a good lawsuit to get us in the rails. But that's
I mean, Doug, speaking of that, like, don't you guys think that everyone's like looking at AI to take over the front part of the business, but shouldn't we really looking at like how do we automate using ML and AI to streamline some of the back end operations, scheduling and things like that?
Yeah.
That's the real value.
Just the automation. I mean, Jason Yard said really well a couple years ago as well. Like, it's just math. We've been doing this. We've been doing a degree of matching for 20, 30 years, right? And so this whole notion of it being a shiny object and ripping all these costs out, some of that's true, but again, we've got to be very careful, and I would say slow and methodical in how we go about this.
And educate the buyer.
Correct.
Really.
But if you think about the long-term impact of our industry becoming more efficient and effective because of technology, let's call it, rather than using the AI word. Or as my father-in-law said, "Are you doing anything with that A1 thing?" Anyway, that's what we call it now, instead of the A1. But anyway, but if you think about that, in the world of services, let's use services as the example. When you start getting control of that, we know there's great big, massive savings in year 1 because it's been incompetent. Now we're putting some efficiency effects around us. But at some point, you can't get any better. So let's say you've absolutely nailed it. And then the client wants to pay less and less for that service. It becomes commoditized.
Yeah.
There's nowhere for our industry to go if we still stay within Jason's point, getting paid on a percentage of spend where our job is to reduce that spend. And if we get really, really good at that, we actually earn less money.
Yeah.
So it's a real dichotomy.
There's a perverse incentive there for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, if you, in the environment that we are in, and frankly, the cost pressures that that our clients are facing, I mean, I'm sure all of the colleagues here on the call will agree that the questions from the clients continue to be, how can we save more? And how can you do what you do faster, better, but also cheaper? At the same time, they want innovation. And, you know, in particular, also tell me what's in 5 years. Like, how do I have to shape my workforce? So consulting on our side and driving innovation are big. And we have to invest in that. At the same time, being paid on lower volumes on a percentage of spend model is tough. So that worries me. I think that I know we've been utilizing these cost models forever. I personally think it's wrong because it's undervaluing what it is asked of us and what we actually bring to the table. So how long is that still sustainable is my question.
So speaking of that kind of gets us to the next thing. Is the MSP role becoming more advisory versus transactional? Because I think the past we looked at it transactionally, but if you want high level consulting, like I think some of the mistakes buyers are making sometimes is going to some of the bigger consulting firms to try to figure out CW strategy. And I've actually had one where the big firm told them to go through like monthly tenure limits, and that would give them cost savings. I'm like, you need to hire a team of like 50 onboarding specialists to do that. And so what are some of the risks and things that buyers should be aware of before engaging a big four versus somebody who actually knows the space on CW?
Well, I think you just hit it. It's why are there conversations about the ivory tower academics versus the business school professors versus the business leaders? And it's because theory doesn't always equate to practice. And I think that's exactly the truth of this scenario too. There's a lot of things that sound good in paper when you're staring at a spreadsheet, but if you don't have the experience applying those methodologies, stubbing your toe along the way, taking those lessons learned and playing it forward, you're missing a big part of the equation. So it's not to say that they don't employ some very smart people. They absolutely do. But what is the depth of their experience, the currency of their experience, and the ability to navigate the real world pressures that don't exist in a prescribed theory.
And so they should really be leveraging you guys in terms of using consulting dollars and applying that, and not try to get all this value out of the MSP fee, because you can't scale the business that way. Right?
Yeah, truthfully, my kids still to this day, they're in their mid to upper 20s, say that I'm a janitor because I told them growing up that that's my job. I just clean up shit. So that's what's happening here. Our industry is cleaning up this shit that is happening from these advisors to them. And you just have to be the best janitor, quite honestly.
That's another good analogy, Teresa. You've got all the hits coming.
Sorry, it's been a day. It's been one of those days. But no, I mean, we can try to be, at the seat at the table where they're at, but inevitably they are going to give bad advice, and we just have to be the best there to clean it up, and really hold on maybe some pricing to do that.
Yeah.
I like it, Teresa Carroll, head janitor.
With all the keys, with all my keys on my hip.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the pricing model, it's because it's easy. It's not because it's the most appropriate. It's easy. It's easy because you can get away with having to go to an investment committee and request central funding. You're pushing it out, and there is a degree of scalability. Your funding grows as your consumption grows, and vice versa. So it doesn't make it right, but the reason that we're here is because we all took the easy path for a long time and continue to do so. Now it's ingrained.
Yeah, this industry has been selling to someone that has not been expert at getting big capital budgets. The rungs up, it's a very different situation. They actually move fast. They can get massive amounts of budgets, and are willing to agree to things in the name of speed, where everyone else is talking about less expense and more affordable. So that for me is what the 2024 inflection point is about, and what these RFPs are representing, is that people are finally taking this strategic level of seriousness that it's worthy of investment, and moving a little bit faster with technology at the core. And in some cases, including some internal technologies, like some of the chatbots and things, where it's an integration to a Beeline VMS or something like that, not necessarily expecting the Beelines to be the ones that are coming out with these chat edge enabling technologies and other things like that.
So Jason, all the commercials for Beeline, thank you. But I just wanted to offer.
And others like them.
I just wanted to offer, you mentioned earlier the CFO at the table. I think technology's at the table more.
Yeah.
I just want to come back and add that to your comment.
Yes, thank you.
Doug, your thoughts?
I just think Brightfield hung the moon. I don't have any other thoughts. Look, honestly, on this topic, being under private equity, we were challenged, 4 years ago to move to a fixed license model with different bands. And we've actually surprisingly been very effective at it. Now, I think Fieldglass has done the same thing. So that helps when two market leaders are pricing similarly. I don't have the luxury that you do, Jason, so I typically can't get to that level. But people are accustomed to buying software in a licensed mode. And so honestly, I think 70% of our deals this year are license-based, which is totally different from how things were in the past. And I'm also very vocal on the MSP front. The problem is, you guys actually have been super advisory for 25 years. That's not new. What happened was people started playing the roulette machine, and then the percentages kept coming down, and then you had to focus on just doing the day-to-day, putting belly buttons in seats, and so you couldn't afford those people anymore. So this is a self-inflicted wound that I was definitely part of 25 years ago with the pricing model, but I do think it's just because we got so competitive, and I got to get that deal, I'll take it down 100 basis points or whatever the case may be. And here we are. And yet, to your point, Karen, they want innovation, they want more service, they want advisory. Oh, and by the way, I need a price decline of 10%. It just doesn't work, right? So we have to change the model wholesale.
But isn't it the customer, Doug? Is you have a customer that cared about those 100 basis points, and a bigger capital plays, they talk about the effectiveness, the speed, not 100 basis points.
Right. But I think primarily who we're calling at, like, that's awesome. You can get to that level. Typically, we're not. I'm not. Maybe y'all are.
I mean, yeah.
I think it all depends on who has the power in these organizations, right? Like if it's procurement and CFO, then it's all about cost. If the business and HR are strong and see the value, then that helps. Like that, it's a case by case situation, in my opinion, a lot too.
Which is what Doug is saying. We can't do anything at scale in the industry.
Right. Yeah.
But do you think maybe it's because we're viewed as like an Uber of the industry, and we're commoditizing it? And if you start looking at the value prop and change how things are measured, right? Because compensation drives behavior, and buyers get paid on percentage of savings. So maybe there's also a value of delivering faster and more strategic, and there's an increase in their revenue model because of what you're doing to help them deliver faster.
But even Uber gets paid for supply and demand.
True.
Handsomely.
Yeah.
But you're tying in on something else, Ash, and I think there's a lot of innovation across all the companies that represents I'm looking at right now that just still isn't adopted. It's a very myopic, I just got to get X, Y done, check in the box, I've got 97 other categories I have to go manage tomorrow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of strategic initiatives and software and services we've offered over the last years. It gets better and better, but we're still lethargic in adoption, in my opinion.
So Teresa, do you think we should be doing, like, when it rains, Uber's prices spike? So demand spike pricing?
I've always said it's like a supply chain. We should get better at, I'm not saying we have either. So I think as an industry, we need to get better. The closest we came to it was COVID. Look what happened during COVID.
Yeah. So Bruce, procurement services, it's a hot topic this year. I'd love to get your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's growing like crazy. I think it will. When all the reports come out of this year, next year, I think it will hide some of the decline in staff org, because sometimes the way organizations report that is not quite clear. So I think we'll see the industry have growth in 2024, but I think the vast majority of that will be because of the services growth. And I think that companies are, because everything we've just said about what companies have been through, there's a hesitancy of going out and hiring people. So it's a good time to get it off your books and offshore or outsource it or find a service provider to do that. And that helps you as well when you're on a tight budget, because that number is that number. It's not going to grow, and scope creep and everything else, which staff org can do. Hire somebody for 12 weeks and they're still there a year later. So I think for all those reasons, companies are finally waking up to the fact that their largest spend they have when it comes to labor is the services category. We used to say 4 times contingent. Now I use the term 5 to 6 times staff org. I think it's about right. And it will continue to grow. And I think that our industry, I think it will help us rise in credibility and exposure to the board. So it's bigger numbers. You start getting involved in some of those tight relationships they have with some of their big providers you have to get in the middle of. And it naturally allows us and enables us to get into those much more senior conversations. And when we're doing that, we all know we're more successful because then they're buying on value, not on price. So I think it's a great thing for our industry.
Don't you think, Bruce, that it's fascinating how long that adoption has taken, though, as well? I mean, Doc, you said it before, literally, like, think of direct sourcing. Like, I don't know, there's many other topics I can think about. I'm still stunned, like, as to how long it takes for this industry to convince organizations that bringing SOW spend into a program, gaining visibility, like having a good process end to end using technology and all that brings a ton of efficiency and savings. And yet it's a very slow adoption.
I feel like though, like it like clicked into place though. And I feel like Bruce and I we were saying last time we chatted that, we're finally seeing phase 1 include SOW management, which is incredible. Like mind blown. Finally, we're getting to that point. But honestly, we've still got a long way to go. And I think, frankly, it took desperation, I think, for organizations to say, you know what, we got to do this. It's the only place where there's any coins in the couch cushions. Like, we've got to go somewhere. Yeah. So they're going there, and it's been really great. We've seen double-digit growth for the last 4 years in SOW in that category. So, and I think it's probably going to be more this year, just from what I'm seeing.
Jen, let me ask you something.
Our industry did a lot badly, let's say, that's caused some of that lethargy is we've concentrated too much on the CPO and the CHRO at best, or category manager and head of TA, and not built those relationships with the CIOs and CTOs.
Yep.
And other business functions.
They're the ones that hold the purse strings there. And that is the problem. We get yeses all day long from procurement all the way up through the CPO. Right. And you couldn't build a business case with McKinsey to get them to agree in IT, and they pull the plug so fast, your head would spin. And that's the big issue, right? And so then when you pivot and go, actually, well, let me figure out how I can make this work for you in IT, exactly to your point, Bruce, that's when the light bulbs went on, because then they realize what the value is for them, and we're building it for them, which is really the user, the buyer. Right.
I think there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's also this perspective that, like, for us for you to launch a new CW program or launch a new program, it's a lot more work to add SOW into it while you're going live. And is that true, or is it the same amount of effort you can get them both in at the same time? It's not going to be that much more.
It's almost easier because you trunk. I guess it's like choose your own adventure, but you truncate the experience. You're in implementation for less time. I mean, it's different people that are going to be sitting in on some of that process. But to us, it's like, just get it done. And then you see the value and the cost savings and the efficiencies all at once. I believe too, if you really want to do both and you only do phase 1 contingent labor, it just prolongs the inevitable, which means SOW won't ever get stood up. And you can sign the contract and you agree to pricing and everybody's like, yes, we can't wait to do it. And then it dies on the vine. So to me, it's like, we've taken a totally different approach to it. And like, I think that has a lot more impact also in adoption of the overall program, because there's no other pockets, right?
Nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
I think in this era, Ash, the pain of doing it the old way got hotter, more painful. The benefits lessened, and the costs and efficiencies of tackling it got way better. So like if you're going to tackle misclassification, the idea of trying to grab a few thousand documents and crunch through, are these misclassified? That used to take a year and a lot of money. Now it doesn't. So the pain has come, the pain of the fix has come down, and the realization that you can't just keep overspending like this just because you're in a speed race, a foot race against a different tech giant or something like that. Everyone woke up. And so I think, now is the time to make sure that people are putting the proper spend controls in place that makes it just good business and not about a savings pursuit and just being rational. And it can show up in a tech stack with a service model like we're talking about.
Totally. So Jason,
when we have their arms around it, the balloon animal will shift again. So they'll have visibility into that. I call it 7 times the spend, Bruce. So they'll have more visibility. So it'll be interesting. That's why we have to be fluid and agile and be able to play in all the spaces that the balloon animal moves to.
Teresa, I mentioned your balloon in the intro. That's why everyone's talking about the balloon animal.
Oh, before I got on.
Yeah. So the other question I have for all you guys is, so there's now as many tech applications for staffing as there are staffing agencies, I think, at this point. So our company's going to implement 8,000 staffing applications to integrate into their procurement, or we call it RFP tech. Are you seeing a pullback on that? Because especially last year, the market's now getting super confusing with all these EOR, AOR, payroll apps that are launching, claiming they can do it worldwide when we've seen otherwise. And what are your thoughts around this?
First of all, I'd love an industry analyst group to get it right what payroll and EOR and all of that is, because as you know, in between Kelly and my role here at Magnet, I went to Paychex and ran their largest PEO, so I have a view into what they call AOR and payroll. And our industry analysts are putting it all together in one bucket. So, is it full-time? Is it contingent? Which geographies? Small company, big company? So all I'm saying here now is I wish there was an industry analyst who would get their arms around it in a manner that we can actually learn what that whole landscape looks like.
Well, the tech piece of that is even more complicated, right, too. So it's like, then you've got all of these different segments of what they're delivering and very niche. And some are really clever and cool. But there isn't a whole lot of homogenous, there's no category that just all kind of looks and feels the same. There's little bits and pieces that they pick up in the process.
Yeah, some are really cool, but they're point solutions. And so there's not a lot of, for requesters, especially one of those with a broad workforce, it's not a lot of simplicity in terms of how they interact. And there is a natural limit on the amount of plugins that you can have before the process just breaks. And I certainly think we're seeing that. So I appreciate the specialization and the thought that goes into some of these cool solutions, but there hasn't been equal thought to how it fits into the overall ecosystem and the experience, the simplification of it for the end users.
Mm-hmm. It's a whole wide open market.
I think I'm excited about it. You sounded excited about it. A whole open market.
And then let's talk about DEI for a minute. Is there a quiet retreat around that? How are ERGs and BRGs being implemented differently this year? What are the trends? Jen, you mentioned in January the impact of affirmative action rulings and how it could affect the DEI movement. Looking back 6 months, have you seen a significant impact, or do you feel like it's about to kick off again, just like the rest of the industry?
I just think it shifted structurally in what people were really trying to accomplish. I think thankfully we did see a lot of really positive momentum with how organizations are embracing inclusion, and inclusion beyond just ethnicity, but inclusion across everything, all diverse angles. And I think that is a tremendous positive impact. What I'm not seeing as much of is, there was that period of time when we saw a lot of organizations wanting to quantify the diverse talent even within contingent labor, and that obviously got pushed a little bit to the side. But I think qualitatively, organizations still want to move the needle. Our organization has, we're measured by, making sure we keep a diverse workforce, and we're driven to keep inclusion as front of mind as possible. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that the needle shifted a little bit, but I don't think that we lost. I don't think we went negative in the impact from an inclusion standpoint.
Yeah, my view is similar but not identical. So one, I wouldn't say it's a quiet retreat. It's been a silent retreat. It's been dead quiet. So there's been shifts that have been happening, but they're not being broadcast. They're not being announced. It's being done, and it's being done without advertisement whatsoever. And the part where I really agree, though, Jen, is that the conversation hasn't stopped. It's shifted, and some of the very targeted, focused campaigns have subsided. But generally speaking, on behalf of our customers, on behalf of ourselves, they want to be good corporate citizens. They want to be good members of the community. And how do you do that? You extend an open arm and outreach to as many as possible. So I think the shift is to inclusiveness, to use your term, Jen. We're trying to cast as wide a net as possible, being as inviting as possible. Some of the very specific campaigns have subsided, and they've done so in silence.
I agree. Bruce, your thoughts? Teresa?
The only thing I'm going to add is I think it was Bruce said that they're going to where the workers are. And to me, it's a math problem. If there's not inclusivity, you're not going to find the workers, because the demographics of the U.S. are changing. So that's what I tell my customers.
100%. Karen, Doug?
I think we've been focusing more on partnering with some really neat organizations out there who are doing God's work in terms of not just sourcing diversity candidates, but actually investing back in them. And so, and I was talking with a prospect the other day who's talking about challenges around some of the, let's call it gray collar. It's like, look, we will invest in Compton, California to put people to trade schools. So that was a client's perspective. There are several staffing firms we're working with, with my advisory council. I brought it up, so did anybody want it? And everybody raised their hands, and I think they'll get business out of it. But for me, the difference maker isn't just kind of this marketing campaign of this is what we were able to present. A portion of our revenue or whatever, because we're actually passionately involved and tied to this, goes back to education and then the sourcing and internships. And so I've seen some really cool things in the last several years, but I agree with how you characterized it, Brian. It's been silent. And like Jason says, it's hard to talk in the aggregate. Like politics is local, so are all these topics, right? So there's some that I've seen it just doing a great job with it, and others haven't really done much to move in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add maybe a little bit of a different spin. We did a recent survey I thought that was interesting at the Adecco Group, where we surveyed 2,000 business leaders across the globe. And interestingly, only 50% have a framework in place for using AI responsibly and ethically as it pertains to DE&I. So the reason why I bring that up is there's a lot of talk about the difference between men and women in how we trust that AI is fair in getting, that job, or how, AI is utilized in interviews, facial recognition, behavior, whatever. So I think it's actually a really interesting angle that we should not forget. And I think more education has to be done to ensure that we really are using digital transformation and AI in the right way to not, have bias that we don't want, even though we want to use these tools for unbiased hirings.
Yeah, absolutely. Bruce and Jason?
I wouldn't know to add. I think it was all said. Thanks.
Okay.
And I have to run. I don't know if I'm the only
All right.
one.
Yeah. One last question real quick, and then you can go. Industry morale, how do we get it back?
Start hiring like it's 2022.
1999, baby. Party it up.
I'll give a trite answer, maybe. I don't know. But what got me excited to be a part of this industry and continue to want to do cool things in this industry are these people on this call. And so if we keep inspiring each other, challenging each other, and being there at the coalface of making things happen, I think that's exciting. And if others don't think that's exciting, what are they doing here?
100%, Jason.
I agree. I love that.
Morale's good. So.
And always have levity. I have my bingo card for the debate. Do you?
All right. Well, thank you all. This is amazing, and look forward to doing it again.
Always appreciate you hosting it.
Bye.